Hello chess friends, and welcome to Azarov's chess channel and to my advanced chess theory and to another part of the King's Indian defense. Today the King's Indian against the so-called 4-pawn attack, and it's an attack, well, it's an aggressive line from White's perspective. He really dominates in the center, but let's see the possibilities of Black's play here. So let's see the 4-pawn attack. It goes d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight on c3, bishop to g7, e4, d6, and now f4. Well, White has really good center control, but as I told you in my previous videos, how to break pawn storms or pawn chains, you simply have to break them. So you have to attack these central pawns. So maybe with moves like as c5 or e5 to simply break this pawn storm, and in some continuations after c5, d5 will be played, and then again break the pawn storm with the move of f6. So after castling, you're preparing c5 or other possibilities, and here I wanted to show you that an early e5 by White isn't so good, because you will simply take, and if the opponent takes with the d pawn, you simply take, go with the knight in center. So if the bishop attacks the knight, then you have knight on c5 attacking back the bishop. So, and then bishop on e6, which attacks this weak c4 pawn. But if your opponent plays something like b3, then you have f6 and really opening this dark square diagonal. So if your opponent plays b4, then you have a knight on d7 again, and to protect this pawn, maybe if he plays c5, then you have maybe a5 possibilities, and again f6, because although these pawns are protected, but you will simply attack these pawns that are protecting these pawns, and although White has this space advantage, you have a really a great attack on their weak pawns. So I want to see that these pawns are weak. So if the opponent takes with the f pawn here in the center, it's even worse for him. So you simply go again knight on d7, and if White wants to protect the center with the knight on f3 here to get an extra protector of this d4, you simply break again the pawn chain that I've told you. You simply break it in the middle here on this pawn, and if White takes, then you have you take the e pawn, and after trade of queens, you see now the pawn structure. Although the material is equal, but you see these double pawns in such a game without queens. It's really they are really objects of Black's attack. And if something like bishop to e2 comes, and then you have you can even take this knight on c3 and give up your bishop pair, because if now takes, you see now the pawn structure is really bad, and you have maybe moves like knight on c6, which will really block these pawns out, and you have here a very good central control with the e and f pawn. So you see no pushing in the center so far by White is possible. So I wanted to show you games with another continuation in the center. So the first game that I wanted to show you, it was played in 1964 between Svein Johansson and Mikhail, and Mikhail with the black pieces, and he is really a great tactician, and here he crushed his opponent in let me see, in 14 moves. So with against the 4-pawn attack, again with the Benoni style that I wanted to show you. So d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight on c3, bishop to g7, e4, this okay, different setup, but again with this d6, and we have this 4-pawn attack again, and after knight on f3, so the opponent didn't play e5. Here I recommend you again, as in the same Steiner attack that I showed you in my previous video, with the same attack, again to go in this sort of a Benoni style with this move c5. So here I wanted to show you the continuation if white takes on c5. So now we have to play this move queen to a5, because it's attacking, it's really pinning this knight, and the threat is to take on e4. So if your opponent takes something like c to d6, then you can simply take on e4, and if your opponent plays something like, I don't know, bishop to d2 to protect this knight, so you can simply take this pawn on d6. If the queen takes, then you have this taking on c3, and the rook would be hanging. So if the opponent plays in this position, even further taking of the pawn, so you will simply play rook to e8, and now if again the same position comes with bishop to d2, you simply take the rook, and this will be simply better position for black, because white has really dark square problems. Again, knight on c6 possibilities, bishop to g4, fast development, and maybe rook to d8. This will be really a very fast attack on white's king, and of course white has this dark square problem, and without the dark square bishop it would be a problem. So after queen to a5, Johansen played the bishop on d3. So now Mikhail played knight on d7. Again, you see this liberation of this dark square bishop, again on this weak c3 knight, and here white gives an extra protection of the c3, but now black simply take with an attack on the bishop. So bishop to c2 was followed, and now king queen to b4. You see, Mikhail goes really aggressive on this b2, and because it's in a protector of c3, and that's why white played bishop on b3, because you see this bishop isn't good anyway, because it's sort of blocked out by its own pawns. So now I think white would be satisfied if he could trade this bishop for his very good knight on c5. So that's not what happened. Here Tal played queen to b6, and he's sort of preventing white to castle, because he would have then a discovered attack on the king, and now queen to e2 was followed, because he probably wanted to prepare bishop to e3 and then castle. So now Tal took this knight on this bishop on b3, and here white made a blunder. He attacked the queen. He was probably thinking that Tal couldn't get out with the queen, or then and then to take the knight if the queen goes back. But Tal found, of course, this move, queen to a6, because now it's a pin on the rook, and now white played rook to d1, because if he would have played maybe something like knight on c7, then the continuation would be simply after castling. Now the knight would came out, and with the piece up, black is of course better. So after rook to d1, Tal simply took, and here where white resigned. So again, you see black's a piece up, and after something like knight on c7, this would be the continuation, and again he would take this knight, and this would be a really winning position for black. So the other continuation in the center that I want to show you, it was again played with the black pieces by the legendary player, by the player Robert James Fischer, and now we see again this 4-pawn attack, and now again with this c5 continuation, again in the Benoni style. Now knight on f3, and well, you see it's a different move order, but it would be the same if knight f3 would come and then play bishop to e2 with a sort of a delaying position in the center. So here's where Fischer simply took on d4, and he really already break the pawn structure in the center. So in this, if your opponent allows you to take on d4, take it. So it's a good decision. So in some variations you will see in my future videos, I will show you with the continuation of d5 when it was played with while closing the center, and but now white allowed black to take on d4. Now after knight takes on d4, knight on c6 come, and after bishop to e3, here I wanted to show you that after such moves, that really you can here create a sort of an endgame, and you can create an equal endgame. But you see Fischer played here a really good endgame, and when you have this setup, I want you to memorize that you have this move knight on g4. So it's attacking the bishop, which is the protector of d4. So now you see if black takes on e3, so this knight would be hanging. So that's why white has to take on g4. Now you take with the bishop, and in the game was followed bishop takes on d4. Now the attack on the queen, and if the queen takes, of course, then you have knight takes on d4. So although with the space advantage in this setup, you see this would be again weak pawns. So that's why white goes queen to d2. So he relies maybe on these dark square problems that black has. So that's why here Fischer decided to take the knight on d4, so he isn't allowing white to create some dark square problems. And after queen to d4, here Fischer finds a really aggressive move, e5. So white took, of course, and you see black really broke this pawn structure that white has built. So he's going for this pawn storm principle. He really breaks them all the time. But now here Fischer found an in-between move, queen to h4 check, and of course if g3 follows, then black would simply take, and this would be a better position for black, because after something like this you could have f5 maybe, and really breaking the position. So after queen to h4, queen to f2 was followed, and now Fischer took on f2, and now the pawn. So rook to c1 was played, and now rook to d8, going for this open file, and that's why white tried to block this open d file, and here bishop to e6 was played. So now you see, although again a good central control by the pieces of white, now again Fischer goes for simply breaking them. So against this pawn storms, I'm telling you again, simply breaking these pawns in the center, and after rook to d1, you see f5 again simply breaking, because you have to create some open files, open diagonals for the bishop, and that's what Fischer does here. So with this discovered attack on the king, it's really dangerous. So that's why white took on f5, and now Fischer took on f5. A follower of mine, he asked me if I could show some endgames, and here is a really good endgame by Fischer. But in in my near future, I will create an extra reproduction list of endgames, and this will be the game that I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you a couple ideas in this game, but this game will be an endgame strategical showing video. So uh, you see now, Fischer has created what I've already told to one of my followers. He created this two connected pawns, and two connected pawns in an endgame, they are really good. So the other thing is that why is Fischer on the advance here? It's a small advance, but uh, if you see the pawn structure, they're on both sides. So when you have pawns on both sides, a bishop is better. When you have pawns on one side, a knight is better. So here Fischer goes in. Well, it was probably an endgame that he knows that he can come into, and so here he has this advance of pawns on both sides, and the other advance that he has pawns connected. So here really good connected pawns, and in the center, what the other thing is, so they are flexible, they can move, and they can if they go around this pawn and maybe go to f4 and e4, they will be unstoppable for a rook. So in the game was followed king to f7, and the other thing in the endgame is that you shouldn't treat your and that's what I've told my follower already also, you shouldn't treat your king as a piece that you have to protect. You should treat it like you should treat the king like a piece that you can play with. So now the king has to move, and to here, when the position is so central, so he will try to get more into the center. So basically a king in an endgame is like a queen, but it can only move one square forward, but it's really a good piece to play in an endgame. And of course, with such with not so many pieces on the board, no mating threats are possible. So now the king has to play. So that's the main idea in endgames. The king has to play. I want to memorize it. So now comes rook to d1, and here Fischer goes simply for the trade of rooks, and it's okay. He knows that he is in a better endgame, and here b4 was played. So you see, they're playing on both sides. Now here, what white probably wants to do is create somehow on pass pawn. So, but here b6 was played. So simply, that's another idea, because in an endgame you don't want to have pawns on the same color that your bishop is pointing. So here you see Fischer makes here sort of a dark square setup of this pawns, and so he can be flexible with his bishop. So he doesn't want to that his pawns are blocking his bishop. So now a4, and now bishop to e6 again. c5 was played, and now Fischer takes. But you see, white has managed to get a passed pawn, but it's a weak pawn. It's a pawn that can be attacked. So so now you see, now we have here this pawn islands that white has created, and they're object of black's attack, so they can be taken. Here Fischer plays again more central with the king. Again, you see the king has to play. Now king to g3, king to d7, king to h4. So now you see Fischer is going for a pawn. So now comes king to g5, and here Fischer plays e4, and now he has created at least sort of a protective system, so he can at least protect and have a free king to play, so the king can play around and on many of the squares. So if something attacks the bishop, so it will probably go to c8 and protect this c5. So now white plays g4, and he wants to break again this disconnected pawns, and that's a good idea, but the problem is that Fischer is simply standing better here. So Fischer took, and now white took on e4 and sort of protect this pawn. Now Fischer played a5 again. You see, he played a5, and here's the problem. A4 now is an object of white's attack, of black's attack, and in an endgame you should know that that the knight, well, for a knight it's the worst to play against the pawn that's on h or a file. So a pawn that's on the end of the board, because it cannot be so easily attacked by the knight, and you see that's the problem here. Here Fischer found this very good move a5, and very good endgame played by Fischer. So now this a4 is a weakness, is a target, so it will be eventually taken by black's bishop, and here we have then an passed pawn that's on the end of the board, so it will be probably not be it cannot be catched by this knight. So that's what Fischer is playing for. And now comes king to f4. Well, white is trying also go more with the center, and now you see this attack on this weak a4, and simply taking. So now white feels that he has problems here to stop the a pawn, and here Fischer simply plays h6, sort of a delaying move, and now he wanted to play, of course, he wanted to white to play with the knight, so he can take this c5 now after taking, and after a couple moves here white resigned. Why is that? Because now you see black has created two pawns on the end of the board, and now the king has to follow one of them. So the idea is to go with the king to this pawn, and the knight cannot simply stop this pawn. So the king would have to help to stop the a pawn, and then black would simply go with this king for this pawn, and this is a winning game for black. So let's see to the end game. So in this position, I've told you, now we are playing on both sides of the board. Here a bishop is better. We have here connected pawns, and the idea is here to create a pass pawn on the end of the board. So when you're playing against a knight, this can be an endgame strategy to play on this pass pawn on the end of the board. So here Fischer created one pass pawn. Of course the h wasn't a pass pawn, but he created two pawns on the end of the board, and this was simply unstoppable for white. So as I told you, I will in my future I will create some endgame strategy, but first of all I wanted to end this King's Indian videos. So I wanted to create the first repertoire for you that you can apply in your chess games. So it's really important, I think, in our first session, that you find a very good opening repertoire for yourself. So then we can manage to do some end game ideas. So thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best.